one of our primary objectives in this class is going to be to build a first portfolio site, or build your first portfolio site that you'll be able to use to be able to secure an internship or freelance work while you're pursuing your degree in design. And in order to do that, we're going to start by building a template. So as you were learning about HTML, you probably noticed that pages need to have the same content, or there are at least some pieces of content or code that need to be the same on every single page. And if not, you're going to learn about that in this exercise. But long story short, in order for an HTML page to be properly coded, and it's really important with HTML that everything be marked up correctly. That's really the main point of HTML. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and all it really does is describe to the browser what each piece of text or code, or what each thing on the page should be and how it should be treated in terms of the hierarchy. And in order for HTML to be considered correct, every page needs to have certain pieces of code on them, and most of them need to be in the same place on every page as well. So what we're going to do is create what's called a template, and that template is going to hold all of that code that needs to be the same on every page, as well as some placeholder things just to remind us of things that we need to update as we go along. And if we can get this template built correctly, then what we'll be able to do, if we're sure that all the code on it is right, then we can use it to create other pages for our website, and we can just add the things that need to be added for each individual page. And so that's the process that we're going to take through this. Now I'm looking at our next assignment, and we have some learning objectives. So when in doubt, you always want to review the learning objectives just to make sure that you understand what the most important things are. And the most important things here are going to be to learn how to interpret a sitemap so that you can plan the navigation for a website, and also to create a template that's going to include the content that you need on every page of a website, and to apply what you have learned in the HTML tutorials so that you can format your website content using HTML. So those are our three main objectives. Now we can start with our setup with the instructions here. So the instructions are part one, we just need to set everything. To make things easier, I'm going to move our assignment instructions onto a second screen that I'm not recording, but know that that's what I'm following along with. So if you want to follow along with me, you just want to navigate to the assignment instructions and follow along there. So our first instruction is to create a new file in our GRD188 folder and name it template.html. So what I'm going to do actually to do this is I'm going to drag my GRD188 folder here onto my Sublime Text icon. And on a Mac, what that does is it opens Sublime Text in a different view. It opens Sublime Text where I'm viewing a project instead of just a page. What that does is it gives me this left-hand navigation bar that shows me all of the files and folders within the root folder for my site, which currently is this GRD188 folder. And so what I can do now is move, across all of the files that are in the folder. I can create new folders if I need to, and I can keep everything organized, but I don't have to open individual files. Now, this should be available to you in any code editor. I'm going to assume that since this is probably one of your first web classes, you're probably going to use Sublime Text so that you can follow along with me. So I'm going to show you some shortcuts for using it as we move through. But know that if you chose a different code editor, these shortcuts should be available in that other code editor as well, but the commands to get to them may be a little bit different. So anyway, what I need to do now is create a new file. I can do that by using my keyboard and doing a Command N for new, and then a Command S to save, and I'm going to name it template. Now in my case, I am going to add the extension 2. Make sure again, if you're using a PC, that you have turned on the ability to view extensions so that you're not adding a second HTML to one that the computer is adding for you. But I'm going to name this template.html, and I'm going to save it right in my GRD188 folder. So now I have it. It just doesn't have any code yet. Now one of the things that we want to do as we're writing code, and I'll remind you of this as we move through, but one of the things that you should have learned in writing HTML in your tutorials is that HTML is built on a structure of what I would call dependencies, or parent-child relationships. So one HTML tag or element will contain others. And what you would refer to is the one that contains others is the parent to the others, and the others are its children. So what we want to do is we actually want to use our left-hand indentation meaningfully so we can see those relationships. So for example, you saw me do that in Sublime Text here, where I opened up an HTML tag and then I indented to the left one tab and wrote the content. But then when I closed it on a new line and I made sure it was at that same left-hand indentation. So we're going to be doing this throughout, and you are going to be evaluated on doing this only because it really saves you a lot of errors and it helps you to find errors a lot faster if you use this left-hand side and your indentation on the left-hand side meaningfully. So we're going to do that. And then the next note that you have is that for this, you really need to create all the code from scratch. Don't go off and find other code that's available unless I specifically give you that code in the instructions. So there's a few things in the instructions that would be really hard that I just give you to copy paste. But other than those things, you want to create this from scratch. If you don't, I have to view that as plagiarism, so keep that in mind. And as you're learning code, you might not know all the ways that I would be able to tell that it wasn't written from scratch. So just make sure you write from scratch so that you have a better chance of learning this. And after that, the last thing we need to talk about to complete our part 1 for the setup is that you're going to study this sitemap so that you can figure out what your website should include. Now, I'm going to record a discussion of the sitemap in a different video so that we have it in its own kind of video container, if you will. And we'll talk about what a sitemap should include and ultimately why we would want to study one, and also hopefully give you the insights that you would need to draw your own sitemap as you were planning a website as well.